Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise and I want to thank you, my Father, for this day. I thank you, Abba, for this, as we have entered into a new month in a Gregorian calendar, but as we are on the 14th day of our calendar, on the 5th day, and this beautiful full moon that we see in the sky. And so, Abba Father, I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you for that which you are doing in this hour, Abba. I thank you, my Father, that you are so faithful. Father, your word is so rich. And what a privilege we have in the hour that we find ourselves in right now, in order to be able to have your word being opened up to us in a way that is beyond our understanding. And it was like, for me to understand today, as you were sharing with me today, we so desperately want always a visitation from heaven, to be able to see you in this heavenly realm. But what did you say to Thomas when Thomas said that if I see, then I will believe? And you said, blessed are those who do not see, yet believe. And so, Abba Yahuwah, you are wanting us to be in a place of where, even though we cannot see many things, many times I get frustrated because as a prophetic person, I want to see. But the revelation that you give is the revelation of what needs to be seen in your word. And I have come to understand that when the word is opened up to us, that is the jewels that comes from heaven. That is the jewels that we would have, because this word is just word on paper if it is not going to be opened up to give us the deeper revelation of who you are. And when our eyes are opened, when the mind of our understanding is opened, Abba Yahuwah, these words come and reveal who you are in a way that we can stand in awe of you. And when man truly comes to the place of being in awe of you, that is when we truly understand the fear of Yahuwah, because it's a reverence of who you are. When you reveal yourself in your goodness, your love, your grace, your mercy, it's so much more powerful than when you reveal yourself in your judgments. And how sad it is that most people only truly find you when the judgments are upon them. But if we would only learn to seek you in a time of when you reveal yourself to us, when we stand in awe of who you are, of the greatness, of the magnitude, of the understanding of who you are. And then we understand who we are. And then we can put ourselves in the right place of where we should be. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you. Oh, wow, I stand in awe of you, my King. I thank you for the revelation of what you are going to open up to us as we continue in this book of Shemot, of the understanding of this foundation that you have given us in this book. And Abba, today I just want to say, I'm so sorry, Father. I'm so sorry, my Father. I'm sorry for what Christianity has done in being able to downplay your Torah, downplay your laws, downplay your commands, rule it all out, change it, make their own, and not truly look to you. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just pray that now is the hour that you would really start to open up your people's eyes to understand how are they truly going to know what sin is. How are they truly going to know? How are we going to have a young people growing up right now that will know what sin is if sin has never been told them what sin is? If mankind doesn't have an understanding of what sin is, they can just carry on and you hand them over to their reprobate mind and allow them to do what they want because they want to be their own gods. And this is what's going on in the world right now. You are handing mankind over to the desires and the lusts of their own flesh. And how sad that day is, my Father. Because when we truly think of what Yeshua has come to do for us, how sad it is that we've even allowed it to get to that place. But I thank you, my Father. I thank you because we are in an hour now where the truth is going to be revealed and the truth is going to be spoken, because the people need to know the truth, hear the truth, and be set free by the truth. And you will have your people that you are going to raise up in this hour that is going to shout it from the rooftops so that people can repent and turn back to you. And so, Abba Father, I thank you that I can commit this time to you right now as we look into this wonderful teaching of your commands and the understanding of each and every one of them, to be able to understand what was your purpose, what was your plan in wanting to give us these commands. And if we do not have any kind of commands, how do we know what sin is? And if mankind could just understand that, do they become a law unto themselves, or how does it work? And so, Abba, I just want to thank you that you open up the mind of our understanding to be able to receive your truth. Speak through my mouth, speak to my mind and to my heart, the very oracles that will come out of my mouth. And open up our ears and open up our eyes so that we may hear and that we may see the deeper things of your word, the deeper truths of your word. And so I thank you that I commit this time to you right now in Yeshua's name. Amen. Praise Abba Yahuwah. So we are going to embark on an exciting journey, a very exciting journey that I am very excited about, because I truly believe that when we are really going to be able to come to the understanding of being able to look at our pattern in what the Father is doing in being able to solidify this pattern for us, so that we understand that without us having a proper foundation, how are we going to be able to stand without a foundation? So we have understood that the Father has brought us out of this Egypt, started to give us his instructions, showing us his way as we are now in this wilderness, brings us to Mount Sinai, where he now wants to be able to make a covenant with us to say, I want you to be my people, and I want to make a covenant with you. But like with a covenant, it's a ketubah, and it comes with instructions. And then those instructions come with a small little word, if you will obey. And so we are going to be able to look at these commands, and we are going to be able to look at them by being able to look at very specific understanding that comes from the Father's pattern that he'd already given me of the 7 days of creation, and then understanding the 10 plagues, and then how he brings in the 10 commands. So let us just start, as we're just going to start right in the beginning with Exodus chapter 20, as we're going to read, and it says, "And the Lord spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah." So he tells them, I am Yahuwah. I am Yahuwah, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. So, it's interesting because when you really go look at that word Elohim, I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Now, if you look at that word Elohim, and this is the thing, you see, this is why Father did not want me to use Elohim. Because, so if we look at the word Elohim there, it can definitely, if you go back and you look and you see, and it's like I've already established, that I've already explained to all of you, that this Elohim can be masters and rulers and, you know, then they put, and this is the thing that really frustrates me, because you will have people will put a big G and then a small g, and then they'll put a God, capital, and then they will put a small g for little gods, or they'll put a small Elohim with a EL, a small little Elohim, and then they will all of a sudden put a big E for Elohim. And that is why you go back to the most ancient book that we have, which is the book of Job. And there, mostly in the book of Job, we have the name being put there, which is Eloah. And so, we have to get back to the original of the things that was in the original, and the Father spoke to me, and we can look at this in a different way to say He is the ruler, He is the Yahuwah of everything, He's the ruler, He's the judge. But when you put an im at the back of it, it means rulers, judges. So how do you put an im? Because if you're going to put an im, you're going to make it plural. So if you're going to put Elohim and you say that it's Elohim because it means rulers and judges, then it's not one ruler and not one judge. So I need you to look at this, because the Father is wanting to bring us into truth. And I understand that our Bible, just like all the other Bibles also will turn around and say Lord God and Jesus. This one says Elohim. But in other places it says Eloah. Well, it will say Eloah. But we know the O is actually a W, because it's a Vav. So it's Eloah. So that's the first thing that I want to be able to point out for us there. That's the very first thing that we need to be able to point out. And then he turns around and he says, I am Yahuwah your Eloah, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. So we understand that he's the one who's brought us out of the land of slavery. And so we are going to look. Oh, what have I done here now? I'm still recording for a moment. I thought I had touched something. So he says, you have no other mighty ones against my face. So this will be the first command. You will have no other mighty ones against my face. So you will have no other gods before him. Now you can call them gods, because that's what the world uses when they talk about a mighty one. They call it gods. So and this is what we're going to understand, because by the time we're going to get to the third command, we're going to understand this. So, you shall have no other gods before me. And so they put there mighty ones, but Elohims, no other gods, is what they use as well. So when he brought about the 10 plagues, what was the reason for him bringing about the 10 plagues? You see, so why are we going to link up the 10 commands with the 10 plagues? We need to understand. We need to just lay this foundation over here. so that we can look at every plague, because we've got to understand the Father is setting up a precedence here with His people. He's taken them out of slavery, a people that were in bondage for more than 400 years. Did they really know Him and His ways? He's been silent for more than 400 years. There's been nobody to be able to really talk to them. They have had their forefathers and their forefathers and their forefathers before then that spoke about this El Shaddai, because they definitely didn't know Him as Yahuwah. So He says, when He brings about the 10 plagues, it was to reveal to all the nations of the world who He is. There was going to have to be no other mighty one, no other God besides Him, that He was going to reveal to all mankind, the greatest nation on the earth at that time, that He is Eloah, Yahuwah of the Hebrews. And there was no other name of any other mighty one, no other name of any other God that would stand except Him. So do you understand why His name is so important? Because He was going to have to reveal that He is Yahuwah. I am Yahuwah. He tells them, I am Yahuwah. Your Eloah. So He is the Eloah of these people, and His name is Yahuwah, and the whole world was going to have to know what He would have done, because they will know Him by His name. And that there was going to be no other God that would stand against Him. And He was going to have to reveal Himself. So that is why, if we go back and we have a look, we're just going to cover a few scriptures, because we're going to just build our foundation so that we start going forward from there. In Exodus chapter 5, verse 2, listen to what the Pharaoh says. And the Pharaoh said, so if we look at verse 1, and it says, and afterwards Moshe and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, thus said Yahuwah, Eloah of Israel, let my people go so that they celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness. So they needed to come out because He wanted them to celebrate festival for Him. So you see, they were going to have to celebrate a festival. Not our customs and our traditions and our man-made festivals, but the festival that Yahuwah wanted them to be able to keep. Now listen to what the Pharaoh says. And the Pharaoh said, who is Yahuwah that I should obey His voice to let Israel go? I do not know Yahuwah. Not am I going, nor am I going to let Israel go. So do you see, yes, the very first thing, the Pharaoh is saying, who is Yahuwah? So none of the nations of the world know who Yahuwah is. They don't know Him. And this is the mightiest nation in all of the world, because remember, the whole world was coming to be able to buy from them grain, to be able to see them through the worst famine that there was. So Egypt had become the strongest nation. So the Pharaoh was saying, who is Yahuwah? Who is this Yahuwah that you're talking about? So the Father has to already reveal Himself to show who He is. Then in Exodus chapter 6, so if we go to Exodus chapter 6, from verses 6 to 8, and it says, say therefore to the children of Israel. So this is now Abba Yahuwah speaking to Moshe to say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yahuwah And I shall bring you out from under the burdens of the Mitzrites, and shall deliver you from their enslaving, and shall redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments. So, he's now saying to them, I am Yahuwah. I am the one that's going to deliver you out of the hand of the Mitzrites. I am revealing myself to you, to all of you, by my name. And I am going to redeem you with an outstretched arm, but it's going to be with great judgments. And this is what's coming again. He's going to be our Yahuwah. He's going to deliver us, but there's going to be great judgments upon the earth. And shall take you as my people. So listen to what he says. And I shall take you as my people, and shall be your Eluah. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah, your Eluah, who is bringing you out from under the burdens of Mitzrayim. So he is going to have to reveal to them who he is, because they don't really know him. They know about him, but they don't really know him. Then in Exodus chapter 7 verses 5, he says, and the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yahuwah when I stretch out my hand on Mitzrayim, and I shall bring the children of Israel out from among them. So you see, he is going to reveal himself. So what is he doing? He's not only revealing himself to his people, but he's going to have to reveal himself to the Mitzrites, who are in turn going to have to speak about this to all the other nations, because word travels fast. And the word is going to get around. And the name of Yahuwah is going to be known. Very important. But let's see. The minute Moses comes and reveals the name to the people, the first thing that happens to them, what happens? Then they go even into more slavery. Then they have to make their own bricks. Now they've got to gather their own straw. They're not given the straw and all of that. So the hardships become, the persecution comes with it. So the minute you start to be able to really know the name of Yahuwah and walk out the name of Yahuwah, it comes with a price. It comes with a persecution. Because it's like I explained on Shabbat, that this name is a set-apart name for a set-apart people. And so for you to be set apart, there's going to be a persecution that comes with set-apartness. So he was going to deliver them, and he was going to have a people for himself. And he was going to reveal to them and every nation who he is. And understand, the Egyptians was the most powerful nation. But he was going to make an example for all the other nations to know who he is. Then if we look at Exodus chapter 9, once we look at Exodus chapter 9 and we look at verse 14 to 16, for at this time I'm sending all my plagues unto your heart, and on your servants, and on your people, so that you know that there is no other like me in all the earth. Now if I had stretched out my hand and struck you, and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. And for this reason, I have raised you up, in order to show you my power. So the Father is revealing his power, and in order to declare my name in all the earth. So here we go again. So we're seeing what the Father is doing. He's revealing his power, and he's revealing his name by these plagues. So when we get to the commands, we need to understand, why is he setting a precedence with the commands? Because it is what he's already had to deal with in terms of what he is dealing with in the plagues. So, at that time, the Israelites came out of the nation of Egypt, where they worshipped other gods. They were worshipping other gods. They didn't really know who Yahuwah is. They heard about him, but they don't know him. All they heard was what their father Abraham spoke to Isaac and what Isaac gave to Jacob, and then their fathers, and they would have passed this words down, that there were certain rules and certain commands that they had and that they sacrificed to him, but they didn't really know him. They didn't really know his ways. Now Yahuwah had to reveal himself to them because they need to know him. And how will they know what is pleasing to him or not? We need to have right rulings so that we can be set apart to him. So that we know what we need to do and what we don't need to do. We need to be able to be set apart to him and his ways. And his Torah is his instructions for holy living. We need to know what is pleasing to him and what is not pleasing to him. We need to know what he approves of and what he does not approve of. And so if we call ourselves his people, then we need to follow him and his ways. So he gave his commands so that we would know his way. It was just like Elsie and I were speaking earlier, and we were saying, you know, we've got sets of rules for our road. Now, if you are going to be able to go and drive a car, you can't just get into a car and go drive a car. Because if you have not learned the rules of the road, you might learn how to drive the car. You might know exactly how to drive a car. You might have learned to drive the car when you were maybe 13 or 14 years of age. You can get behind a wheel and you can learn to drive a car. But unless you sit with a book and learn the manual of your learners to know the rules of the road, you will know how to drive, but you will not know the rules of the road. And this is what we want to do today. We want to receive Yeshua. We want to say that he's my Savior, but we don't really want to be able to understand the rules of the foundations of this book in order to be able to serve him the way he's got to be served, so that we may be able to serve him properly. So, does it just help you to be able to know how to drive a car? You can get in behind a car, know exactly how to drive a car, and you will create havoc on that road if you do not know the rules of the road. But now, people will want to turn around and say, the law is not necessary. The commands is not necessary, because now we have the Holy Spirit. But I ask you, what is the Holy Spirit having to bring to your remembrance? How do you know what's right from what's wrong? When a little child is born, and you take up to a 3-year-old, take your little child up until the age of 3 years old. If you do not teach them what is right, what will they do? They do what is wrong. They will touch what you tell them not to touch. They will go where you tell them not to go. They will defy everything that you say. They will do the opposite. They will actually look at you. You say, don't touch. And they will look at you. And almost like while you're still looking, they're putting out their hand to go and touch. But yet you've just told them not to touch. And so that is why you will have to be able to teach this child, because its evil nature is there. And you have to equip this child in order for this child to be able to know what is right from what is wrong. Now take a child that has no discipline whatsoever, that the parents just let them run loose and do whatever they want. How does that child behave? What becomes of that child? They are lawless. They are unruly. They got no ways. Because why? There was no discipline. There was no instructions. There was no bringing a way to them to say, you don't treat that person like that, because if you look at them, there's no order there. They will just hit and slap, and then what is the thing that they say? You to put two little ones together in a room, and let another one, put a little one in the room, and let another one the same age come, and then let them want to play with your toys. It's mine. It's mine, it's mine. It doesn't want to share nothing because it has a selfish nature. It's selfishness. Because why? The evil nature is there. And that is why when the Father said, train up a child in the way that it is to go. Because its nature is tendency to be evil. It isn't just born with this beautiful, gentle, sweet nature. It is born wanting its own way. From the time it learns, it will have its own way. If you teach it that every time it screams, you're going to pick it up, it knows. I'm going to scream until mommy comes and picks me up, and then I'm going to keep quiet, and this is what it will eventually do. And this is what you will accustom it to doing, and that's what it will want to do all the time. Because why? Because this is how it's learned. So, the same it is with what the Father needs to do with His people. If we do not have rules by which to be able to be put in, how do we know how to go about life? How do we know? The same thing as if you take a game, if you take a soccer match or you take a rugby match, how do you know how to play the game if there's no rules? Then it's just a bunch of people running around and they can do whatever they like, and the next minute soccer becomes rugby and scrambling around, and this is the way it is. The same as if you've got to have netball. You're not allowed to go around bouncing a ball backwards and forwards because that's basketball, that's not netball. So, do you see, there's rules. And that is why we are going to look at Romans 7, verse 7, because remember, if you have to know how to explain these things to the people so that they can have the proper foundation. So the Father is giving us simplistic things to be able to explain and say, what you're saying is absurd. For you to turn around and say, we don't need any of this, it is ridiculous. Because how do you drive a car on the road without having any rules? It's impossible. Because the rules of the road are there for your protection and for everybody else's protection, so that you know how to drive on the road. Because if you're just going to get into the car and drive, and you've never had a book where you've had to go do your learners to be able to first learn the rules of the road, then knowing how to drive the car is going to be of no use to you. Because you will be hazardous on the road. So if we go look at Romans chapter 7, verse 7. I'm busy at this point in time really working through Romans. Romans chapter 7, verse 7 says, what then shall we say? So you see, Romans is a very controversial book. And if you are going to have them quote you this book out of context, you are going to, they will take you to the cleaners, especially when you are going to be able to read it in these other translations. Because if you go read this book in these other translations, they will keep telling you how the law has been done away with. And so it says, what then shall we say? Is the Torah sin? Let it not be. However, I did not know sin except through the Torah. So do you see, how will you know what sin is if you don't have your instructions? How will you know how to drive the car if you don't first know? You can learn to drive the car, but if you don't go and do the test of the learners to know the rules of the road, you can drive your car, but you will not know any rules of how to drive it on the road. I did not know sin except through the Torah. For also the covetousness I knew not if the Torah had not said, you shall not covet. So, do you see what I'm saying? If you don't have the Torah, if you don't have the Father's commands, so when we were at school, we would have to know those 10 commandments. They were in the assembly. They were in the classrooms. We all knew, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not commit adultery. You knew what the 10 commandments were. You knew you were not to steal anything because those commands were in front of you. Now you've got a bunch of children in school. How do you know? How do they know that they are not to steal? Who told them that they're not to steal? How will they know they're not to steal? Where did they know that they're not to steal? If the parents never taught them that. How do they know that they ought to be able to honor their mother and their father? How are they going to know that they ought to honor their mother and their father? How do they know if they've never been told that they ought to honor their mother and their father? Nobody ever taught them that. How do they know that they are not to commit adultery? Nobody ever taught them that. They never ever heard a command. I mean, if you take this youth of today, where all the commands have been taken out of school and all these things have been taken out of school, how do they know what's right from what's wrong? Do you see the lawless generation that we are in now? And that's why it says lawlessness will abound. Sin will abound. Why? Lawlessness is going to abound. Why? Because this is no longer being taught. Remember, you're not allowed to have any religious way being taught in schools in the day and age that we're in now. If they're not being taught in their homes, I mean, I just take myself as an example. Okay, I came from a home where my mother and my father never so much as had a Bible. We never ever had any Bible in our house. I mean, we were Catholics. Catholics don't have Bibles. Generally, a Catholic person that is just a Catholic person doesn't have a Bible. They go to Mass with a Sunday Missal. It's like most of the Jews. A lot of the Jews do not necessarily have a Tanakh because they go to the synagogue with a Siddur and they pray their Siddur prayers. But it's not to say that all of them are going to read a Tanakh, the Bible. The same as a Catholic person. Catholic person has a Sunday Missal. They are going to go to church with their Sunday Missal. And then they follow the script that is there for what needs to be said, and then the priest gives you then he gives you a reading from the gospel, and then he gives you a reading from the epistle, which is going to be from the letters. You will never hear any reading, ever, from the Old Testament, because it's going to be the Gospels and then the epistles. And then you follow your little Sunday Missal, and it's like a 3-year cycle. And then when the 3 years is finished, you start the cycle again. And now with the Jews, it's the same. So then I realized, okay, where did the Catholics get this from? The Catholics got it from the Jews, because the Jews go to the synagogue with their Siddur. So, if you are not going to be taught these commands, so if I take myself, I went to catechism until I was, I think, standard 1, till I was 10 years old. I did my first Holy Communion, and that is all I did. And then that was the end of church for me. And that was the end of any kind of religious things. But I was still at least learning religious instructions at school. But in my house, there was no ever speaking about the Father or anything to do with religion, for that matter. We never ever sat at the table and read a Bible, because we never owned a Bible. I never ever owned a Bible. I bought a Bible for the first time in my life when I was 30 years of age. I never owned a Bible. Only when I got saved, or just before I got saved, I went and bought a Bible at CNA. I wouldn't even know where to go buy a Bible, so I went to CNA to see if I could go buy a Bible, which is like a normal bookshop in this country. Not a Christian bookshop. It's where you go buy big books and pens and paper and, a lot of other stationery. It's like a stationery shop. So, when I was brought up, there was no speaking about the Father in my house. There was no speaking about the ways of the Father. I went to church with my mother until I did my first Holy Communion, which is I was 10 years old, and then after that, I never really went back to church again. Neither did she. So, if I had not got saved, where would I be today? Now, I would have still had a little bit of the understanding of the commands, because I learned them at school in my religious instructions. Not that I ever went and learned them at home from my parents. But I did catechism, and in the catechism I would have learned a little bit of that at the same time as well. And then I learned it at school. Until matric, we had religious instructions. So, when I then got married and had children, why on earth was I going to talk to my children about anything to do with the Father? Because I wasn't brought up in that. I didn't have any religion in me at all. By this time I wasn't even going to church. I was far from being a church person, completely, totally and utterly a heathen. I went to church for weddings, baptisms and funerals. That was it. Now my children today would have been total heathen, because they would have never learnt about a God. They would have never known about a God, because they would have gone to a normal school, which by that time the father would have been taken out of school. And my children would have never known anything about such thing as 10 Commandments. So they would have been a law unto themselves. And they would have lived their life. And this is what we see in our society today. I'm painting you a picture here today for you to understand the lawless society that we are living in. Because most people have totally and utterly turned their back on the Father. And then those that are going to a church are now being told you don't even need the 10 Commandments. So where are we now? And this is what we must understand. So, if we did not have a foundation of knowing what's right from how will we know what's wrong if we don't know the truth? How do you know that this is wrong if you don't know the truth? And this is why right now they want to rewrite the Bible. They've rewritten the 10 Commandments because they don't want any of it. Because they don't want to be accountable to what is there. So in 1 John chapter 3, it says, 1 John chapter 3, and we're going to look at verse 4. And it says, and everyone having this okay, let's read from verse 2. Beloved ones, now we are children of Eloah, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So we are to become like him. And this is what we're going to understand so powerfully in this very first command. And everyone having this expectation in him, everybody having this expectation in him, cleanses himself as he is clean. So be holy as he's holy. Everyone doing sin is also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. So you see, we have made sin in the world that we're living in right now to be, what is the sin that we want to look at sin and then say, oh no, we are sinning because maybe we look at external things, the person drinks or smokes or does these external things. But sin is a very big thing. We think that they are sinners just because they break certain laws. It's not just the fact that it's a law. We have to understand what a sinful person is. So a lot of people will say, yeah, but I don't drink and I don't smoke and, I'm a good person and I do all of this. But we've got to understand sin, which is what's not being explained in this day and age in a church environment. Because sin is lawlessness, and lawlessness is the word G458, which is the word, it's concordance reference G458, which is the word anomia. And that word anomia is the condition without law. So if you don't have any law, then how do you know what sin is? You see, this is why, if we say he's done away with the law, how are you going to know that you're sinning? How are you going to know that you are grieving your Father? So do you see, never judge your right standing with him based on how he uses you, because he can use a sinner. He can use these people. He uses these people. Just because he uses them doesn't mean to say they stand right before him, because a true sinner is one who is violating the law. Because of ignorance or violation of the law. So it's because of ignorance. Violation of the law is iniquity, wickedness. It's the transgression of the law. It is unrighteousness. So we are to know our foundation, because the Torah was to reveal his ways, how he wants to be served. So if we don't have a foundation of our Torah, that's why I said, Shabbat, the Father gave me the most amazing revelation of the two legs that make up the two pillars of our foundation. Spirit and truth. You need to have the truth of this word. And then you need to have the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, to help you to walk out the truth of this word. Because if you just have law and you don't have the Spirit, then you are not going to be able to put it into practice, because you will have this, you'll have the law, you'll put it into practice, but you cannot then crucify the flesh man, because that is by the Spirit. The Spirit of Yahuwah works it in you both to will and to do his good pleasure. And so if we don't have perfect scales and we're not perfectly balanced, then we are going to not be able to understand the fullness of our foundation. And so if we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and this is where we see, this is an eye-opener for us to turn out and say, but that was for the Jews. I was speaking to somebody this morning, and this person this morning was sharing with me and saying that, she's very grieved in her spirit, because all of a sudden there are many people that are now starting to fall from this path of the truth of coming back to his ways of Torah, which is a foundational covenant. And she was talking to me about a very big ministry in the States that is well known to be able to have really taught a lot of the Christians how to come back to Torah. And now they've just changed their stand and said, you know what, we've come to understand that Christians no longer need this. This is for the Jews, it's not for the Christians. I think to myself, well, you've got to be joking. So what happened to Romans 11, where we are grafted into the same covenant? So now we make ourselves excluded now. So do you see why the Father is really, really making a point of where we are to come back to these truths? And so we have a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10 from verse 1, and it says, "For I do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea." So you see, this is in the renewed covenant for us to understand that Exodus, the 5 books of the Torah, is there for our instructions and to learn as an example for us. And all were immersed into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea. So they were all immersed. They were all baptized as they came through the water. And all ate the same spiritual food. They all ate the same spiritual food that came, the manna that came from heaven. And all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that flowed, and the rock was Messiah. However, listen, and this is the warning. However, with most of them, Yahuwah was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. Why? Because he tested them in the wilderness, and they didn't obey. So there's many that call themselves to be children of the Most High and think that he is so pleased with them just because he answers their prayers and just because they do all these great works for him. All of this is his mercy and his grace. We are in the dispensation of grace. But then we will stand before him, and he's going to judge. And the only way that he can judge is according to his word. He's not going to judge you in any other way, because his word is the measuring stick, precept upon precept, line by line. It's his judgments. This is what he's going to judge his people on. So if we turn around and now say, well, I received Jesus, okay, great. And he's the one who's supposed to be teaching you to be able to come into truth by his Spirit. Now, what did you do to know the truth? How did you walk out that truth? How were you revealed? How are you going to know? The Ruach of Yahuwah has got to work with something. That's why he's given us instructions. And these became examples for us, so that we should not lust after evil as those indeed lusted. So do you understand? We have even less excuse than what they have, because it's like we will get there. Once we go into these commands, we are going to get there to understand. They did not have the blood of Yeshua. They had the commands that were spoken to them. They did not have the spiritual side of it. We have spirit and we have truth. We have less excuse. We have a greater judgment coming against us if we trample that blood from the first plague and the first command under our feet. And do not become idolatrous. Sure. So, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not bow down to them. Thou shalt not worship them. Man, if we have to start with idolatry, we won't even go there. Because the very first idol, that is the most biggest idol, is self that's still on the throne. The people sat down to eat and to drink and stood up to play. Neither should we commit whoring, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. So do we fornicate? Do we fornicate with other gods? Do we fornicate with the things of the world? Neither let us try Messiah, as some of them also tried. So do we put him to the test? Do we put him to the test? It's like I was speaking to a friend of mine today, and this friend was saying, and I've heard this before, no, I will go and take the sting because Jesus is with me. He's going to help me. Are you going to put him to the test? So, I will do what is wrong, that I've been told it's wrong, that I've had all the information to tell me that it's wrong, but I'm going to go do it anyway because he's with me. But what is that? Do we put him to the test? When the devil said, why don't you just jump off this place and the angels are going to catch you? He says, you do not put the Father to the test. You do not put him to the test. Neither grumble, neither complain, as some of them also grumbled and complained. They grumbled, they complained, and were destroyed by the destroyer. And all these came upon them as examples, and they were written as warnings to us. So now I ask you, what warnings do we have if we don't want to read the Torah? What warnings do we have if we just take the first part of this book until we get to Matthew and say, well, none of that do I really need. I don't need to read any of the Old Testament because that's prophets, and maybe I'll read Psalms and I'll read Proverbs, but I don't need to even read the prophets, so we don't really know what's coming, and I really don't need to read all these books. What do I want to read Numbers for? What do I want to read Exodus for? What do I want to read Genesis for? I don't need to read any of this. So then how do you know what examples were given you so that you do not fall in the same trap as them? And all these came upon them as examples, and they were written as warnings to us on whom the ends of the ages have come. So I feel very sorry for all those people that are going to stand before Messiah Yahushua and say to him, but we didn't need the Old Testament because it was all done away with. But here is a scripture that says that was for warnings for you to know not to repeat what they did in your generation. Because now you've got even less excuse. So who then thinks he stands? Let him take heed lest he fall. So you see, just when we think we stand, we better take heed, because lest we fall. No trial has overtaken you except such as is common to man. And Elohim is trustworthy, who shall not allow you to be tried beyond what you are able, but with the trial shall also make the way of escape, enabling you to bear it. Not enabling you to take it away, enabling you to bear it. So you have to be an overcomer. And so this is what we must understand, that I am laying a foundation over here for us to understand that if we do not lay out a foundation, we are not going to understand why we have these commands being given to us, why we have right rulings being given to us, because the right rulings I now came to understand when I was doing the Torah portion, it's really just expounding a little bit more on our commands. And why are we reading through all these things? So that we may have the deeper understanding and the deeper revelation of who our Messiah is and what Messiah has come to do in us. So, what time is it? So let us we are going to just have a look at Genesis chapter 1 so that we start with our first, looking at our first day of creation, day 1. So day 1 starts with verse 1, and it starts with the book of Genesis, which once again was changed from Bereshit, which means in the beginning, to Genesis. Now, why Genesis, I have no idea, because they have this idea that they want to change what the Father has actually written. So it's called in the beginning because it is Barashit. Bara, he created. Barashit, which means in the beginning, which is he has created. He created in the beginning. And the earth came to be formless. Now that is important for us to understand, because something had happened on the earth that made it be formless. And empty and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the spirit of Eloah was moving on the face of the water. Very important for us to be able to understand. Because there was a void. There was something that had happened on the earth that made the earth be formless. From what we understand, if we take, for example, the fact that there is dinosaurs, where did they come from? Where do all the skeletons of these dinosaurs come from? What era was that from? So, there has to be something that I believe was on the earth when we know what it says in Isaiah when it says, I saw Satan fall like lightning and he was stripped. And a third of the angels fell with him. So he was the lead angel that was at that time ruling the earth. And something happened because he was the one that wanted to then rule the earth. And then he was thrown out of heaven onto the earth. And a third of the angels was cast out with him. So then the earth was formless because now there was a darkness that had happened. Darkness has happened on the earth. Something has happened on the earth where the Father is now going to start again. He came to destroy whatever was there before. And darkness was on the face of the deep, and the spirit of Eloah was moving on the face of the waters. Important to understand, because the waters is going to be important to understand. And Eloah said, let light come to be. And light came to be. And Eloah saw the light, that it was good. And Eloah separated the light from the darkness. So, understand, it's interesting how there's no sun and moon created yet. That's what's interesting. But he called the light day, and he called the night night, the darkness night. But it wasn't the sun that made it be light and darkness, because sun, moon, and stars are only going to be created on the fourth day. So there was going to be day, light, and there was going to be night, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning one day. So there was a separation that was taking place between darkness and light. And what is the separation between this darkness and light? And so interesting, as Yeshua is going to come and be the light, because he is the light in the darkness. So when there's dense darkness, the Bible is going to say that the world is going to come into dense darkness. Dense darkness will cover the earth, but they will come to the brightness of your light. What light? A physical light? A physical light that you have? Did Yeshua have a physical light? Oh, when these new ages come around you, they say, oh, I see a light, the aura. So the only light that is there is a light that is seen in their spirit. But you don't see a light of a physical light, the way we understand light. And so if we go to John chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. So right in the beginning, Elohim is with Yahushua, and He is the Word that is being spoken, and He's the Word that is separating the light and the darkness, and Yahushua is going to become the light. He was in the beginning with Elohim, and all came to be through Him, and without Him not even one came to be that came to be. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Wow, that is important to understand. Because when He separated the light and the darkness, we are going to understand from the very first plague, from the very first miracle that Moses is called to do, the very, very first miracle. We are going to understand the very first sign that he has to give the Pharaoh is where we are going to understand everything as it's going to be able to play out. So if we look at 1 John chapter 14, it says, and the Word became flesh. So you see, already here, in the beginning, Father is going to create. He already knows what's going to happen in the beginning. He already knows He's going to create man. And man, once again, this very thing that has happened right in the beginning here, of where the earth is void, of where it's formless, of where there's great darkness that is there, and He's going to have to bring a light. And who is going to be the light that is going to come? He already knew that there was going to have to be a light that was going to have to come to redeem man, because He knew already man was going to fall. He was going to create man in His image to be able to raise up a new people that was going to have to take over from this lead angel called Lucifer that was going to be thrown upon the earth. And He already knew that man was going to fall. And so He says, and the Word became flesh and pitched His tent among us. And we saw His esteem. We saw His glory. Esteem as of an only brought forth of a Father, complete in favor and truth. Complete in grace, spirit and truth. Complete in grace and truth. We need the grace, law and grace. We need the truth of the law of the Word, and we need the grace, the Spirit. Verse 16. And out of His completeness we all did receive, and favor upon favor. So out of His completeness, and this is what we're going to look at next week, out of His completeness we all did receive grace upon grace, favor upon favor. For the Torah was given through Moshe, but the grace and the truth came through Yahushua Messiah. So you see, Moses only brought the Torah. He brought the law. But Yahushua is going to bring the law and the truth. The law and the grace. The Spirit and the truth. Grace, which is going to be the favor that we have, which is going to be the grace. The Spirit of grace is the Spirit, the Ruach of Yahuwah that was given to us so that we can have the truth. So Yahushua becomes the fullness of Spirit and truth. Grace, favor, and the truth came through Messiah Yahushua. He is going to be the fullness where the Torah now was only written on tablets of stone. Through Messiah Yahushua, by His grace, by the Ruach that's going to be given to us, it's going to be walked out because it will be written on the tablets of our hearts and then walked out. So we will see the completeness, and that is why we will then understand we cannot have any other gods before Him, because the one was given to us, the one who's come to do all, in all. And so we will look at this as we look at the first plague next week. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you, Father. I thank you for your word, my Father. I thank you that your word became flesh and dwelt among us to give us the way so that we would know how to be able to come back into fullness with you. Yeshua had to come to lay his life down so that we can once again come back and eat from the tree of life that was given to us in the Garden of Eden. Because he came to conquer the enemy. He came to destroy the enemy. He came to destroy the deceiver, so that we no longer need to be deceived by the deceiver. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just thank you, my Father. I thank you for the way that you open up your word to us and that you reveal the fullness of your truths, so that we may be able to get the fullness of the understanding. It doesn't help us just to tell people you need to return back to the Torah. We need to have the fullness of the understanding of our two pillars, grace and law. Law and grace. Truth and spirit. It's our two foundations. It's our balanced scale. And Yeshua is the one in the middle that holds the pendulum all together of the scale, because he's perfect. And therefore we will walk in perfect alignment when we follow him. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you that you opened this up to us so beautifully. You are so faithful, my Father. I stand in awe of your goodness, of your love, of your grace, and of your mercy. Thank you, Abba Father, that you continue to open up the eyes of our understanding to truly come into the fullness of that which you have for us in Yeshua's name. Amen.